Should I go for 3000 Blitz? In this video, I'm going to share what it means to actually be rated 3000 plus Blitz on chess.com. I'm going to share the factors that go into the decision of whether to really go for it, and also what the sort of training and work would look like in actually striving for 3000 Blitz in the first place. So first, to clarify, 3000 Blitz, we are referring to the chess.com ratings. A 3000 FIDE Blitz rating would put one more than 100 points higher rated than the number 1 Nakamura and number 2 Magnus Carlsen in Blitz. And if we're talking lead chess ratings, well, on lead chess, being 3000 Blitz would again put you more than 100 points higher rated than the number 2. So again, we are talking about the chess.com Blitz ratings, which admittedly are more inflated than some of the other sites. Actually, it's funny, on Chess24, I actually reached a peak Blitz rating of nearly 3,400. But again, those ratings are a lot more inflated, and also they have a system where you only gain one rating point even if you beat someone like 1,200, let's say. And that's how I was getting most of my points, so it doesn't completely count. But what exactly does it mean to get to 3000 Blitz on chess.com? Well, the ratings are inflating a little bit, and what I've found is that at the top level, that basically if you subtract 300 points from your Blitz rating, you're going to come up with a sort of approximation for your FIDE level. And so that would mean about a 2700-ish FIDE equivalent if you had a 3000 plus chess.com Blitz rating. And also it matches with the rankings as well, in that there are currently 31 players at the time of this video that have a rating of over 3000 Blitz on chess.com. And if you compare that, with the FIDE ratings, there are 36 people with a FIDE classical rating over 2700 and 27 people with a FIDE Blitz rating over 2700. So obviously we're talking a very world-class level that getting to 3000 really is a hallmark of whether you are a super GM level in Blitz or not. And actually, in the past, when the chess.com rankings were a lot less inflated, I actually had got to that kind of ranking of being about 30 in the world in the chess.com Blitz at my peak. So that's one thing that's very encouraging going into some of the factors for whether to go for it, is I've actually reached very close to this kind of level or around this level before at my peak. So I know that I actually do have a decent shot at actually achieving it if I do decide to go for it, because it's like, I haven't technically got the exact rating, but I've kind of got to around that similar level before. Other factors to also consider are, well, how much time or how much additional time would actually take me to get to that 3000 plus Blitz level. And the thing is, I already spend some time each day, like playing unrated Bullet on chess.com. So it would just be replacing that time with basically playing rated games instead. So in terms of actual playing on the server, I think it would not add much additional time. The main extra time that would be spent would probably be on elements like, let's say, solving puzzles, on doing like chess research, using ChessBase for, and the database for opening study, for game study. And also probably add a bit more time for analyzing my games. The thing is that if you think about it, it would just mean that, some other things I do to relax would be replaced more with some of these areas. So, for example, it'd mean playing less computer games, watching less Netflix and movies and TV shows, which I was doing quite a bit of in the first half of April to kind of relax. So I'd just be replacing some of those things with more kind of working on my own chess game. So in terms of time, I have plenty of time available with the way my business is set up. And there are probably two main concerns that I would have in terms of going for 3000 plus Blitz, like actually pulling the trigger and going for it. The first one would be, is this going to take too much attention away from my business as such? Because if I'm spending, let's say, 8 to 10 hours a day working on my chess and not putting that time into improving the business, perhaps that would suffer in some ways. And I think that is a challenge that can very much be resolved by just, hiring the right people, having my team continuing to do the key tasks. And, I do think that I will have more time available. And when I sort of think about the kind of lifestyle I want to live, moving forward with my life, it is very much to have that kind of freedom to be able to, go and travel quite a lot is one big thing that's important to me. And I also really felt the difference. I actually just came back from a holiday from actually the World Cup in Canberra. which was a tournament held over Easter holiday, and I took my wife, and it was our first proper holiday in about 2.5 years. And that's definitely something I want to do a lot more often. And I suppose if I was actually playing the chess tournament, it wouldn't really count as a holiday, but the fact that I was just there, kind of able to support my students, that really helped a lot to kind of relax. And also it's very nice to meet them in person, so I kind of realized I do want to be a lot more involved in the chess community, not just online on Facebook, YouTube, and helping the students in coaching calls, but I also want to do it on a more in-person level as well. That is something that is somewhat important to me, and kind of trying to improve my own game really would foster that, even on a Blitz setting. So that's kind of a big reason, I think, to make the kind of push. The other sort of barrier, I guess, to really going for it would be probably more psychological in nature. Because I know in the past, I wouldn't handle losing very well whatsoever. And I think it's because for a very long time, I really equated all of my self-worth pretty much to how well I was playing my chess. Meaning that the highs were really massive highs. When I won, I felt absolutely on top of the world. But then when I lost, I would just absolutely crash and just start really beating myself up. And I think if I'm going to really go for this seriously, I need to really change why I approach this on a psychological level compared to before. Where, I don't get completely elated to the point of eudaimonia when I win, but also at the same time to balance it, not get absolutely crushed when I lose and have it affect my productivity and be emotional for the whole day. That's definitely something to work on. The good news, I do have some people in my team and some coaches who can help me with some of these things on a more psychological and mindset level. So it's probably the biggest challenge to be able to do this where I'm not getting totally attached to the result, but just kind of a fun little side thing for me is probably where I'm going to enjoy it a lot more. Because I remember when I got to my previous peak of 2950 Blitz on chess.com, which I actually got to twice, in fact, I noticed that what was happening in those games, I was just very relaxed, just kind of just enjoying the games, not really thinking at all about the result, just kind of playing natural moves, sort of doing what felt right. And I was also balancing that with a bit of chess work. I was working a bit on some openings and solving a lot of puzzles in particular. And those are probably really the two biggest things, I think, when it comes to Blitz, actually, is just make sure your brain is sharp and that you're really seeing all the tricks kind of efficiently. And also, kind of second most point is, having sufficient opening knowledge so that, when you're playing against these professionals, because that's all the levels that these guys are at, and 2900 plus, then you've got to kind of know your opening somewhat well, at least, to be able to sort of compete and not just be playing against someone's engine, but have some ways to either have your own engine lines prepared or have some ways to deviate that will set some practical problems so it'll not be so easy for him to solve in the actual game. And also in terms of the sort of gap to bridge, my current Blitz rating on chess.com, it's very inactive. I haven't played in a long time, but it's currently 2875, which puts me at about 2575. And I've been for a long time, whenever I looked at this rating, I kind of had this feeling of, I know I'm better than that. I know that rating is not a true reflection of my level. If I actually, put everything into it and really focus on it, I know that my true level would be way higher than that as such. I think that once I just shake off the rust, play some games against some strong players again. And also I noticed when I do play unrated Blitz, that actually I do win most of the time, even playing against quite high-rated players, sort of 2600 plus as such on there. So I know, again, that I'm not completely rusty. I have still been playing. But, of course, when you're playing against a high-level opposition, then, of course, it does take some time to get used to just playing a game against a strong player every single time. And, be able to continue playing well, as it were, through those patches of those sessions. So, yeah, that's kind of the situation. It's basically 125 points to bridge that sort of gap. And, I think we've actually, playing... The funny thing is, because my rank is so inactive, I could actually, in theory, get there just with one really good playing session, just beating, maybe 5 to 7 people around my own rating. But also know that, with the professional ratings, it also works the other way, that you also lose a lot of points for losing games as well. So probably that's not to worry too much about, just let it happen in its own time. So to summarize, there would basically be probably 4 main things I would be working on to get to this level. Maybe I wouldn't need all of these things, but this would be to make absolutely certain of getting there. The most important one is probably the psychology, just being in the right mindset, having some good, healthy living habits, for the games. And actually, it's another thing also, it's another benefit of going this. I do found that since thinking about improving my own game, I have been living a lot more healthily, where I feel a lot physically lighter, I feel, a lot fitter, and that, my life is kind of feeling sort of better as a result of this journey. So it's another big reason, I think, to kind of make the push and go for, this much higher level in my chess. Well, actually, maybe it's not actually that much higher, but just, a matter of being able to play at this kind of 2700 Blitz level fairly consistently would definitely be something to be very rewarding. And it's actually something I didn't talk about, which I think is another very important factor, is what would actually mean for me to get to 3000 Blitz. And what it would mean is that, A, it would sort of feel like, okay, now I'm actually a super GM level in this, and I think that would actually probably have a very positive effect for my business, where even though, I'm not maybe 2700 plus classical FIDE, it would still show like I've reached that super GM level in some element of chess other than Bullet. Bullet actually, I was actually that like 2700, 2750-ish FIDE level equivalent at my peak, so I kind of feel happy like to have at least got to that level, even though I felt I could probably have gone even higher there. But yeah, basically with the Blitz, yeah, I think it would just make it would help me stand out even from a lot of the other Grandmasters to know, okay, Max is still active and he's still, beating some of the best players in the world in Blitz when he plays. That would be really awesome to be able to say, and it would just feel like, okay, actually I'm starting to achieve some of this sort of potential I somehow never realized fully in my classical games. It would be nice to at least realize that in a Blitz setting, which is a time trial I am quite a bit stronger in general, I would say. And yeah, also in terms of what else it would mean, I think it would also be very inspiring for a lot of people who are like not professional players, see that, okay, Max was able to get to this level without, spending every single day on chess, like while still running a business and still, doing other things as well, like not just working only on my chess game, but helping others as well. I think it would be a very inspiring message to give, and it would be really fulfilling to kind of do things my own way in that sense. I did it with getting to Grandmaster while doing lots of chess coaching and quite a bit of writing, but it also kind of had a positive effect. It was also kind of improving my own game when I did these things at a very high level as such. So yeah, sort of, the sort of conclusion. I do think that after talking about it, it's something I should definitely go for, and that would really entail working on the psychological aspect and mindset, and just the lifestyle in general. The second key element would be, just doing those puzzles every day, making sure that I am working my brain and building those thinking techniques, just absorbing those patterns automatically. And that's a good subject probably for another video as well. The third key component would definitely be to make sure my openings are good, but not just to slavishly follow like the opening trends, but to come with my own weapons, so really optimized for Blitz to set the maximum problems as such, and to really kind of understand those positions very well. And then the fourth element kind of relates to the third one a bit with the game analysis. That would be both analyzing my own games, drawing the right conclusions from that, and also, analyzing other people's games as well, and again, getting some good ideas and improving my thought process by seeing how other very strong players win their games as such. Not just in Blitz, but of course in Classical and Rapid as well. So yeah, that's sort of the conclusion. Basically, that I will go for it. And now for the final part of the video, I want to just share a little bit about like what my kind of thinking is at the moment in terms of what my opening approach is likely to be. This is probably going to change a lot, but I have thought about it a little bit, and I also have done a very important thing, which is to figure out what positions do I actually play best and which ones actually suit my style the most of all. And also to balance that with what are the lines that my opponents are going to struggle with the most as well. To sort of find that sweet spot where it's positions that I enjoy and play really well, but also positions my opponents are not going to play as well as some other things. And let's start with the white repertoire first of all. So basically, the move that I've sort of done the best with overall in my Blitz games has been the move 1d4. It's interesting, because actually when I was playing in tournaments like in Australia, like when I was sort of a strong IM, I remember that actually e4 was the move I had the most success with. But after looking at sort of my different statistics, I sort of feel that d4 is probably the move that's going to fit best well as kind of my main opening system. It's because there are a few good reasons for me to kind of play d4 over some of the other moves. The first point is that I was basically almost exclusively a d4 player from 2002 to 2008, so I kind of have that background experience even from childhood of like these different patterns. That's one advantage of playing it as the main move. The second one is that it is my move that is generally my best performing move, especially when I play it very specific ways. And the third good reason is that d4 is just the one that has the most flexibility, where let's say, for example, if you play e4, and let's say, for instance, that your opponent plays, let's take knight off Sicilian as an example. Of course, there are a lot of lines that you can play against a knight off from this point, but the thing is that they're going to kind of get a specific type of quite sharp position, and even if you play it in a more positional way, you're still going to have a fairly dynamic battle. And if, let's say, you're not at 100% sharpness, you may not necessarily want to go for it. But if you're wanting to avoid the knight off, then your options are also somewhat limited, if you're already committed to 1e4. For instance, you can play the move bishop b5, and there is some flexibility in terms of the type of position you can go for. And it's true, there are also other move orders like knight c3 you can play, where there are different anti-steals that can be played against d6. But it's also true that by playing these lines, you're not really fighting that much for an opening advantage, but more trying to get a position where the opponent is not so comfortable. Whereas if we compare that with d4, you kind of have a lot more flexibility of options that you can choose between. Let's say we take some annoying system like the Nimzo Indian, for instance, which it was a system I played a lot with black as well in the past with fairly good results. And also it was a line that, I was facing for a very long time. The thing is that from a repertoire perspective, it is very easy, for example, to just allow the Nimzo Indian and just play some system against this. Granted, you're not going to get an opening advantage, but it's also true that black is going to equalize almost no matter what you play anyway, if they play correctly. But the thing is, I've had very good results playing this bishop d2 line of the Rubinstein Nimzo. And again, it's a good example of a system where I have like a 2950 plus performance with this these sort of lines as white. And you can also play via a few different move orders. You can play like bishop d4 on move d2 rather on move 2. You can even play like knight f3 in some lines. Like for example, you could play knight f3, d5, and then play bishop d2. And also even doubles up as a system you can play against the Rogozin as well. Where also against the Rogozin, for example, you would just be able to play, e3, bishop d2. And it's all a way to kind of get the same sort of position via a lot of different move orders. It's something that I've had extremely good results with, beating quite a lot of GMs and strong IMs in this line. And it's also something that, statistically scores better for white than the other lines of the Rubinstein Nimzo. And it also kind of uses my experience playing the Rubinstein Nimzo as virtually my exclusive weapon against the Nimzo from 2002 to 2008. So something that's just a very good fit from a repertoire perspective to have this kind of system, where I can, go into it quite deeply. I can analyze my games and learn more and more. Even within the bishop d2 lines, there are a couple of different ways you can approach the positions, depending on whether you want something more direct or dynamic, or more a long-term strategic position. So it does kind of has that flexibility advantage as well. So that's just one example of what, you can do to have a really sort of narrow repertoire, but one that you know quite well. I think an important thing to consider, like with these sort of blitz games, that obviously your opponents can't really realistically prepare for you. You're just paired randomly with someone for the most part, or someone just does a seek to challenge. So basically, it's a case where you don't have to worry about preparation, but really it's focused on getting positions that you know well, and then the opponent maybe doesn't know quite as well as some of their other things. And there's one difference compared to, let's say, if you play knight f3 and knight c3. Now, I do have very good results from this position. I think my performance on Chess.com Blitz is actually close to 3,000. As a good example, I think for my white openings, actually I could probably perform at a 3,000 Blitz level as white, just by basically sticking to the lines I generally play the strongest in my games. For instance, I noticed that, well, I already talked about the Rogozin, but also against bishop e7, I noticed that my results with the Blackburn are really, really good. We actually have a performance very high, like again, close to 3,000 in these systems. I think I've won nearly all of my games actually from these lines as well. So again, it's very easy just to kind of stick to something, do a bit of homework in these positions to really master them. And also it's nice after knight d7, like you can choose between different type positions like c5, bishop e2. There's some other moves white can play as well, but again, you get to control the type of position that you sort of are going for. So it makes it very easy to broaden the repertoire later. Whether it's to target someone's specific weakness, like if I notice they're not as good in one type of position, I can kind of target that within the opening choice. And also another point is that, let's say if I click one line and I decide it just doesn't really suit me that well after playing it, it's very easy just to chop and change it with another variation and still keep the same general repertoire. And there are a lot of other examples as well, like also against g6, I'm basically going to just play against King C and Grunfeld, the lines that would annoy me the most if I was playing as black. So that would be things like, bishop f4. This is a very safe line, I think is very well suited, where I feel if I play this line, I know that absolute worst case is going to be a draw, but I'm going to have some decent chances to beat the opponent as well, which is obviously quite nice. And also these more strategic lines with bishop f4, I think, do sort my style fairly well. And against bishop g7, I'm probably going to play like... I actually play the same-ish all the time as a junior, and I had very good results with it, and still have fairly decent results with it, actually. So I could very much consider playing the same-ish, which would also mean that, for example, I could play f3 as an anti-Grunfeld and have an extra system against the Grunfeld. It's something I could consider, but I'm probably going to stick more with playing something like h3 and just playing the semi-Makoganov. Because one of these lines that I never really found a system I was happy with as black, and whereas with white I think the ideas are very easy to play, and you can actually play it in a very similar spirit to the same-ish, like with g4, and it's a very similar setup you're going for, actually. So it allows me to still use my experience playing the same-ish, but kind of playing an improved version as such. So that's kind of the general ideas. Of course, there's also d5, but, against the e6 and knight f6, I've had very good results. Playing the exchange, again, something I played from a very young age, like for about 9 years of age, with very good results. I seem to win nearly all of my games here, even against Grandmasters, so I think it's a very natural and effective choice. And against the Slav, I'm probably going to go with something like Slow Slav, just play very strategically. Kind of avoid some systems like the Semi-Slav, for example. Because I noticed that, there are some lines like Bishop G4 and Bishop F5. I did have a couple of bad games, but for the most part, my results were pretty good in these lines. I think any advantage, it's very easy to switch to another variation if one of them isn't working out. I can easily, replace it with another line, and I think that is a very good reason for playing these very flexible strategic systems. And also another nice pattern with a lot of these lines, it's very hard for black to really create some sort of initiative or sort of attack in these positions, and so against very tactical or dynamic players, I think that this sort of repertoire would be extremely frustrating for such players. And finally, against Queen's Gambit accepted, I'm probably going to go like Knight F3 and just play like something very strategic. I know in my opening Skeletons, I was recommending Rook E1 for my students, which is a line players like Aronian and some other strong players have been doing. And so I feel like it's sort of line that has a good surprise effect. I can often get an IQP position, which I think suits me relatively well. So I think that this is a pretty good basis for the white repertoire. Of course, this does leave the question of what to play for the black repertoire. And this one I've been thinking about a bit, because I've tried a lot of different openings, actually, with both colours. I've played pretty much everything, in fact. But ultimately, I think against e4, I'm fairly certain I'm going to play the Sicilian. It actually occurred to me that, while my results... I remember back in 2017, early 2018, I was mainly playing Knight Off Sicilian and having absolutely amazing results with it. Then I noticed that in the last couple of years, my results with the opening weren't quite as good. So I'm not sure whether I'm going to necessarily play Knight Off, at least, to start with. It's I may well go back to where perhaps it's one of these lines where if I studied the opening theory of it deeply, I would have very, very good results with it. I don't feel like it's a good stylistic fit, but I'm also looking for something that maybe is a little bit less known, where I don't have to necessarily keep up with the theory, every single week, but where I can sort of learn it once and just know it better than my opponents. And that's why I'm actually thinking of basically playing the classical Sicilian as my main system against 1e4. As I noticed that very few players seem to be well prepared for this opening, that it seems to catch out a lot of players, like, in terms of lower rated players. So I think I could get a lot of, relatively comfortable wins of just outplaying the opponents by just surprising them. But at the same time, against Bishop G5, I noticed that there were some quite strong GMs recently who were playing this line of, A6, Bishop D7, and then going for this Bishop E7 line as a kind of winning weapon. And it's a line where, the computer says why is a little bit better in some lines, but you also get this very rich strategic position where it's kind of hard for white just to play it safe. And I think that sort of tension is something that does suit my own style quite well, of having strategically quite rich positions. Guys, when I get those kind of rich positions where I do have a chance to fight for the initiative, they tend to do very, very well, including with the black pieces. In fact, this line that I've scored the best with black historically has been Knight C6 and playing the accelerated dragon. And I did consider actually, making this like my main system and going back to it, because it did get me to 2950 Blitz. I'm not 100% sure whether it's going to necessarily take me to 3000. I mean, it's something I could definitely consider experimenting with. It's just that I never really found something I was happy with against C4. And I've considered the possibility of playing something like Bishop G7 and Queen B6 and maybe looking into some of these lines. The thing is, after Knight B3, if they just play Knight D4, a lower rated player might just say, okay, well, I'm just going to play like knight d4 or something. Actually, probably, you know, knight through my allow bishop c3 or something. So maybe queen d2 is a better example. But I mean, like, let's say if they play, you know, knight d4 in this sort of position, it's kind of like, okay, I've just sort of been... Actually, here I probably have knight g4. So maybe it's a little bit trickier than I initially realized. But, you know, this move order, I mean, I guess it would be one point that if they play knight d4 in such a position, okay, at least they're committed to f3. Like, I avoided some annoying lines for this move order. So this is something I might consider as perhaps like a secondary system, or say if I played a classical and it's not quite working out, then I can always, you know, go back to adding this as a system. And that's probably something that would work out quite reasonably, because I do feel pretty comfortable in like the accelerate dragon lines with knight c3 for the most part. In some cases, transpose to a normal Yugoslav dragon with bishop c4, and you know, I've had some good results even beating some like fairly decent GMs there, so I feel pretty confident that the dragon is something that probably suits my style quite well. But there are a couple of annoying lines to sort of, you know, figure out to really make it a perfect repertoire. And there's also the Rosalimo, which I have struggled with a bit in the past. Actually, since about 2003, I always seem to have some problems with it. But I did do some homework on this lines a while back. And I remember back in 2011, I was doing really well with this e5 approach as black, which just seemed to suit me a lot better than going knight f6 in general. And also kind of adding systems like queen c7, for example, in this line. I seem to have very good results with this very flexible system. There are lines where your legion gives white a very small pull, but you get a very flexible position where you can outplay the opponent. So in some ways, kind of similar in that spirit to the classical Sicilian, actually. And it's also true by playing the classical Sicilian, it also gives me the option to play like both knight c6 and the d6 move orders. Meaning that, for example, I go knight c3, I could play either d6 or knight c6 as black. I think that's quite useful to have that flexibility, because I mean, against d6, I have found lines like f4 to Grand Prix a bit annoying in the past. Again, probably with a bit of homework, I can resolve that pretty easily. But it's also true that it's kind of nice to be able to still play like knight c6 and use some of that old Sveshnikov experience as a junior, because I was playing Sveshnikov all the time against e4. I mean, I just kind of use a bit of that experience and still like be able to play something a bit different that perhaps suits my style a bit better now than what the Sveshnikov does for me. So anyway, that's kind of the thoughts with e4. I'm pretty comfortable about playing Sicilian. I mean, I could consider adding like Berlin or Caracan as a possible alternative, because those systems I've had fairly decent results with, but I still feel like I'm not at the same level of comfort in those positions as a Sicilian. You know, I did play Sicilian pretty much all the time as a junior, so I think it makes sense to stick with that and use the line to have a lot of experience. Probably where I'm least certain of what to play is probably against d4. But I sort of have a lot of systems I've kind of played that I'm sort of very familiar with, that I've played a lot, but where my performance rank was not anywhere near as good on chess.com by comparison. So basically the main choice for me is probably between going for the Grunfeld, just playing g6, d5. Of course, it should be d5, not d6, because d6 would be King's Indian. I mean, Grunfeld's one of these lines where there's a lot of forcing lines. I think that stylistically it probably fits me quite well. But the main reservation I have about playing it is that A, there is quite a bit of theoretical workload, so it would mean doing quite a bit of opening state to really be on top of the lines and make sure I kind of remember the things I should remember. But there's also probably the bigger challenge here is sort of a more practical one, that, you know, there are a lot of very safe lines that white can play, especially within the exchange variation, where after cd5, knight d5, e4, like, white has various approaches where it can just sort of, basically if they know the theory, it's kind of hard for black to play for a win, I think, if he just plays down the main line. Now, maybe in Blitz it's not actually a real problem that, you know, the positions are still tense, unbalanced enough that you can still play for win even in positions in classical would just be a very boring draw. But also the thing is, the Grunfeld does have some flexibility in it. Let's say, for example, if they play like bishop e3, for instance, which is one of the lines that has a reputation of being very safe for white. I mean, there are alternative approaches that black can play. Like, you're not limited, let's say, to going knight c6 and, you know, going for an ending, but you can also castle in. Yeah, there are different approaches here, like, for example, rook d8, knight d7. There is moves that maybe not 100% equalizing, which do give you quite a tense position with some good scope to outplay the opponent. So Grunfeld would give me that flexibility where I could play, for example, very safely, where I could be quite confident that worst case the game will probably end in a draw, you know, if I've done a little bit of homework, but with chances to win if the opponent misplays the position, which, it being Blitz, there's a good chance they will misplay in some way. And also these other systems I could play where, you know, you are not fully equalizing, but you had a more tense position. It would give me that flexibility to play for a win against the lower raid players, you know, quite confidently as well. And also against G3, I'd probably go C6. And this line, I don't have that much experience playing it as black, but I'm pretty confident, it is quite solid, and I've had quite good results playing this in a worse version, where white goes B3, bishop B2 instead of D4. I had good results playing that as black, so I'm pretty confident it's not that hard to transition in that sense. Also, there's the other consideration is, I do have more experience, playing E6. I did play King's Indian a lot as a junior, so there would be some overlap, with playing the Grunfeld in terms of, having at least a lot of experience as a kid, playing against things like London, Torre, G3, Kai. I would be able to apply some of that experience, but, okay, it's also true that, my results against these lines are actually very good, I find. I think that, in this line, my performance with G6 lines against the D-pawn specials are probably a bit better with G6 than with E6 lines, actually. But on the other hand, let's say if I play C4, E6, intending the Nimso, which, I've played since 2007, have very good results in them, pretty comfortable in those positions in general. There are a couple of problem lines, like the Rubinstein and certain 4-queen C2 lines, where I would need to brush up a bit on my theory, but it'd be pretty easy for me to find a system that I like and that I can play quite well. I think it's not really a big problem. With knight f3, if I do, let's say, play d5, which is probably what I would do, because I do have a lot of experience playing this, from when I was a professional, there would be the question of what systems to play within this sort of branch. And I think that probably, the system I really enjoy playing is the Semi-Slav. I do generally have quite good results with it. Actually, the thing is also, there are a lot of different ways you can play. I could sort of choose to play either a theoretical battle, or to play something not so theoretical, like Cambridge Springs, for example. So again, there'll be a lot of flexibility into what type of position I would want, and if one line's not working, I could very easily switch to another one as well, or try to target a very specific type of weakness of the opponent as well that I've observed from perhaps playing him before or playing him in a long playing session. So I think there are a lot of merits, making the Semi-Slav kind of a sort of foundational sort of repertoire. It also gives me the option to potentially branch out and play a Slav move order or a triangle move order to reach a similar positions. I think there are a lot of advantages to having the Semi-Slav as my main system. And that's sort of, where I'm a little bit torn, because I kind of, in ideal world would probably want to play both the Grunfeld and the Semi-Slav as the main systems. The Grunfeld into kind of the more open and sharp positions in a sense, and the Semi-Slav being the more solid option, but still with enough dynamism to really suit my more natural style. Because after playing a lot of crazy house chess, it sort of made my style probably a lot more dynamic than it was before. So that's why I'm moving towards these more active piece play systems. And immediately the Catalan is probably the main reason I sort of stopped playing knight 6, e6, d5 for some time. This Queen's Gambit approach. But I think that a line either bishop b4, going for this more strategic approach is a solid option. And going for these a6 lines a sharp option. My results just weren't admittedly that great, when I played in a few games, but it's also too small a sample size to draw a lot of conclusions. Is I think if I did my homework, I would be able to play these positions very, very well. And so that's where I'm a little bit conflicted, because I want to kind of play the Grunfeld, but I'm a little nervous that maybe some lines will be a little bit too sort of safe for white somehow if they just memorize a lot of theory. So maybe it's something that's worth testing, to do some work on the lines, see how they turn out, and, if the opponent's playing too many lines where I just don't feel happy with the positions, then maybe revert back to e6. Interestingly enough, the line actually that got me to 2950 Blitz both times was actually the Benko Gambit. And so it is something I could definitely consider playing, because I do think that I could probably get to 2900, maybe even 2950 playing this as black. But I've also noticed that when I started playing it the last maybe year or so, that people seem to be a lot better prepared for it than in the past. For example, I never really found a line I was happy with against 5e3, so that's one that's kind of a bit of an annoying situation. And also ba6, I was sort of playing this line of Prunovich variation mostly, but I never really found something I was happy with against a7, and again, it could just be because I didn't really study the theory that seriously, so it could be that if I do my homework, I could set up that even if somebody plays the best line, I can, learn how to at least hold a draw from a worse position, but it's not something that particularly excites me. So maybe I keep the Benko as an option, perhaps against, much lower rated players, let's say, if I just want to avoid a theoretical battle and get some nice open piece play. Because I do feel the Benko is a very good stylistic fit for me, but I just don't think it's maybe objectively quite a good enough opening to play, to get to 3000 Blitz. At least, not without, either studying it a lot more deeply, or just playing, as sort of a more of an occasional weapon, let's say, if someone's super booked up, against Grunfeld, or maybe super booked up in Semi-Slav, have the Benko as, a non-theoretical sort of alternative. And also the one thing is it would give some options like going knight f3, c5, but again, I never found something I was completely happy with against d5, so it's kind of why I'm sort of thinking of gravitating more towards the sort of more mainline systems, just I'm not having problems with the openings, and that will give me a lot more confidence. I know that, okay, even if they play the best moves, my position is still objectively okay. I think it's a good feeling to have in general. Though maybe in Blitz that might be a little bit overrated, like trying to equalize out the opening, as it were. And also, this does also affect what to play against knight f3 and c4. That, if I was playing the Grunfeld or playing Benko, then yeah, I would probably go c5, which would fit quite well with transition and Nimzo. And again, I have very, very good results playing the symmetrical English with this kind of g6 and this sort of approach. But it's not a perfect solution, because yeah, I've sort of said before that I'm probably not going to play Accelerate Dragon as my main system. So I'm not sure whether I necessarily want to go into these lines like the Morochi bind, for example. I don't know whether I necessarily want to allow this transposition. So there are a few challenges to figure out, but I can also just play like knight f6 and, play like knight c6, g6, and just play very systematic in this way. Also considering the hedgehog as a possible system, because I've had very good results with it. But it's sort of, something that's still I'm in the process of kind of figuring out. And I may want to playing like both of these systems, just see what suits me better, do a little homework on it, and kind of decide, what suits my style better between the two. Or even perhaps to play both, depending. And also it affects the decision against c4, where I'm probably, leaning more towards playing c5 in some version, but I also maybe want to avoid something like g3. Okay, if I'm going to play like the g6, this kind of system, then obviously it's not really a problem. But g3 is kind of an annoying move order if I want to play the hedgehog. So if I do decide to go for a hedgehog approach, I might go knight f6 move order and then play c5 to kind of avoid those problems. And if they go g3, maybe to play something like c6 and just play like, a Slav style. But when they're committed to g3 and, I can choose between either playing dc4 and just studying the theory there so I know how to equalize, or playing some lazy system like g6 that maybe doesn't fully equalize for black, but just very solid and systematic, where I can sort of outplay the opponents more strategically as well. So, that's kind of my thoughts in terms of the openings. I know it was a bit of a, longer video, this part, in terms of, seeing it, but I thought that, you guys would definitely find it very interesting to see how one thinks about these opening choices at a very high level. So for Blitz, and of course, these ideas can also be applied for other time controls too, but this is sort of the directions I'm kind of thinking in terms of the opening choices, and then it's a matter of, just doing the work, make sure I know the lines that I should know to play these successfully, to also, analyze the game after I played each time to really learn, the right lessons from the, from the games I played, just to make the openings better through my own experience. And then basically with the goal of just really mastering a position, so I'm able to play those middle games and end games very well also, which are related back to kind of the game analysis of analysing these sort of, instructive games from these positions with both sides. So, that's about all for this. So do let me know in the comments below, should I go for 3000 Blitz? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.